Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Kovack, the founder of BeautyMatter. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our BeautyMatter Live episode. And a big thank you to Rodney Manzo and Anvil for their collaboration in pulling today's panel together. Businesses have spent much of the past 9, 10 months scrambling to adapt as the global crisis sort of shed a really harsh light on the fragility of our old methods. There's no going back. Real-time planning and analytics have become a reality. And visibility, collaboration, automation, and intelligence aren't just buzzwords. They've become integral into the successful operation of businesses. The truth is, disruptions aren't unusual. They're actually very predictable. So today we're going to talk about how to turn your supply chain into a strategic advantage. We're so fortunate today to have a panel of leaders from the supply chain world with entrepreneurial mindsets and experience in scaling startups, coupled with learnings from the US Army and Apple to oil and natural gas to food and beverage, and also some of the hottest D2Cs in our category. So I'd love to set the stage for our conversation and allow everyone to introduce themselves with a little background, because you always do, the panelists always do better than me reading a bio. So let's set some context, and maybe you can give us a background of kind of what's brought you to where you are today, and also give us just a snapshot of the last 10 months at your respective businesses. So Nikita, let's start with you. You're currently the global sourcing director at Harry's, a startup definitely in growth mode. Can you share a little bit about your background and what you guys have been going through sort of the past 10 months and what you're kind of contemplating now?
Yeah, most definitely. Well, first off, thanks, Kelly, for inviting me to participate today. And hello to everyone. It's really nice to be here with you. As Kelly mentioned, I'm currently the Global Sourcing Director at Harry's Inc., which is the parent company of the Harry's men's grooming brand, as well as the parent company for Flamingo, which is our women's grooming brand that we launched about 2+ years ago. And as recent as this week, we also launched a new brand called Headquarters, which is a women's root care brand. So prior to joining Harry's, I actually worked in oil and gas at a company called Baker Hughes. And I'm from Houston, so I like to joke that it's sort of like rite of passage to work in oil and gas. But I learned a great deal there and spent a ton of time working in various parts of supply chain, such as quality, sourcing, finance, spent some time as a production cell leader running a production line. And at a certain point, I knew I wanted to pivot to a startup world and take my experience at Baker Hughes and apply it to a smaller company and really help scale and grow a company. And that's when I found Harry's. At the time, Harry's was definitely still a DTC company. We had not yet expanded into mass retail. We hadn't transitioned, or the transformation to mass retail really accelerated our growth. And it also just forced us to scale our supply chain much faster than we normally would have. I would say, reflecting back on the last 10 months, it's been a bit of a continuation of that growth and retail expansion. In the last year, we've launched a total of 12 new retailers, specifically in the drug and grocery channel. Simultaneously, we also launched in new geographies, specifically in Canada retail, and certainly in certain countries in the EU like Netherlands, Germany, France. So lots of growth. And I would say under normal circumstances, managing our supply chain through these launches would have been challenging enough. But of course, we've also been dealing with the impact of COVID just as everyone else. So I'd certainly say a lot of the last 10 months were really dedicated to firefighting any issues relating to production delays, logistical delays, raw material shortages, labor shortages, like the works. And I'm sure everyone on this call can probably agree that COVID has had a way of testing every company's supply chain, no matter how good it was to begin with, and has really exposed weaknesses and gaps that might exist.
Thanks, Nikita. So Emily, you've gone back to sort of true startup mode as the COO of Behave after being part of the team that scaled native to the P&G acquisition. So can you share a little bit about your background? And I know we chatted about how what it's like to go from having buying power to startup again, but what have these past 10 months been like for you?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to share. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. I won't be as elegant, I think, as Nikita's intro here, which was like so amazing. But yeah, I was an early hire at Native and the only sort of person on the ops team leading up to our acquisition. And I stayed on for another year and a half after that as we saw like mass retail expansion. Super fun. Before that, I had a background in a number of random things, including, I had an alcohol startup. I manually like filled cases, moved cases, like did a lot of manual labor, worked in tech, a bunch of random things, and really just found my home here, doing operations and making, personal care and just anything physical, really, because obviously now I'm making candy. The last 10 months, actually, after I left Native, I joined another startup that launched in the pandemic, a personal care company called Wellness, and actually had a great success because of the pandemic. I think there were certain categories that did particularly well. For me, I would say the last 10 months have been really a personal journey to sort of figure out what I really wanted to do. Lucky enough, I found Behave, yet another company that launched in the pandemic. We launched in August. I joined 3 months ago as a COO. I'm happy to share more about that, and I will later in this panel about some of the challenges that I've walked into, but also, how exciting it is to actually be remote. I live in Seattle now. Work with remote teams, and I think launching a business in this environment is actually. Yeah, it's quite fun because I think when you're building supply chains in an environment that's as challenging as this, you just sort of feel that much more equipped for when things do, get better. So yeah, I'm really, really happy to have an excuse to eat more candy now.
Thanks, Emily. So Rodney, you are the brilliant mind behind the Anvil platform. Can you share a little bit about the backstory that led you to start Anvil? And just from a total outsider's perspective, I knew a little bit about Anvil, kind of the marketplace, but did a walk through the platform. And, as an entrepreneur, I've lived through those supply chain moments that have gone completely pear-shaped. And I have to say that you've literally created a platform that solves for every pain point and human error. And it's so intuitive. It's really, the simplicity. So anyway, I could go on, and I'm not even a supply chain person, and I got excited about it. So can you share a little bit about the origin story of Anvil and your background?
Yeah, thank you for the kind words, Kelly, and for having us and for everyone dialing in. Just both academically and professionally, I've been in supply chain operations. I've built products everywhere from tech to CPG, really globally. So you name it, North America, Middle East, Asia, Africa, everywhere. And I kept on seeing the same thing over and over again, and it was bred from personal pain. And when I have kind of an unlimited budget at Apple and I can't find a solution, all the way down to, I go to a startup and it's the same thing over and over again. And that was that supply chain's really fragmented and it's siloed. And I have Excel to help me do a better job. It was just confusing. So from that pain, we started Anvil. And Anvil is just a solution to connect technologies all around you, like ERPs, IMSs, and extend them to provide value back to operators. So we visualize everything from PO entry all the way till goods are delivered with intelligence automation and really good, amazing workflow, kind of modern technology.
I love the chain of command that not chain of command, what do you call it, where you have every single element of a PO in one place.
Yeah, chain of custody for everyone.
Chain of custody, so, that's right.
Yeah, you see who is doing what, when, where, how, and then we automate that aspect.
So one of the things when we did our prep call, there was a topic that surfaced that I was a little surprised by, but on the other hand, it makes total sense. And that was the need to lead with empathy. And so I would like to unpack this a little bit because it sort of lives in that sort of superpower arena, because empathy and supply chain don't often happen in the same conversation. I literally was talking someone off the ledge this morning that was having one of those issues with a contract manufacturer and pricing and who said what. And I immediately thought of our webinar, and she did not lead with empathy. So I would love to get your insight on this topic, because I think it was Emily that you're the one that brought it up, and then everyone kind of chimed in. So I'd love to like sort of talk about it and use kind of an example where it's worked. Because sometimes I think it's very easy to go and take the I'm just going to beat it out of them approach to get what I want.
Yeah, I can get started. I think even before COVID, for me, part of the philosophy to building like long-lasting supplier relationships has always been to approach my suppliers, especially the key partners, with, I would say, respect, fairness, and just like a collaborative mindset. Especially as a smaller brand that to begin with didn't have the same purchasing power as like larger companies out there, I found that some of these basic principles really were impactful in just building successful relationships, to a point where I have examples where suppliers and key talent at suppliers actually ask to work on our account because they like the way that they're treated and they're treated as a thought partner. And I think that actually goes to building the long-term relationship. I think thinking back on last year, one of my fondest exchanges with a supplier was when they sent me 1,000 N95 masks in March when there was a major mask shortage in New York to distribute to my team and donate to the hospital near me. And I know this is just a small example, but for me, it just like sort of demonstrated a level of kindness in a difficult time, especially when everyone was sort of in it together. And that's, a bit on the personal side. But if I think about like even the business perspective of it, as I think back to the suppliers or the supply chains that have really thrived during this time. And I would say like thrive is for me defining as not just not getting impacted, but also coming back stronger. Like those supply chains were with suppliers that we had great relationships with to begin with. And that's where we were prioritized. We were given clear updates and timelines versus the supply chains that I saw the most disruptions without quick resolves were with suppliers where we had more of that transactional relationship.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Emily?
No, I mean, I totally agree. I think, operations, it sounds like much more technical and stuff, but really it's about these relationships and how much you enjoy cultivating them. I think, empathy, of course, it's one of those basic rules of if you're interested in somebody and they're going to be interested in you. And I think especially in COVID, just recognizing that, your business might be the center of your world, but it's certainly not the center of theirs. Like there are many other things that they care about aside from you. And I think if you show interest in that, a lot of the examples that Nikita said, just on a personal level, like they will pay you back in that way. I think more tactically, I think empathy from a business model perspective is also really important and has been really helpful. What I mean by that is not just like, knowing the names of like your suppliers' children's or what like they like to do for fun, but also what are the financial drivers for their business? Like, why does their business exist? Like, how do they make money? How do they make business decisions? I think it's also really important for you to understand those types of things. Just a really quick, simple example, just from my early days at Native, this is specific to our 3PL, our fulfillment center. If you have an e-com business, you think about costs on an order-to-order basis, right? You have your pick and pack, what it costs to make the product, what it costs to ship, what it costs to put it in a little box and then like fold the box, tape it up and ship it out. All those things like build up to get to your COGS and ultimately your gross margin. And so when you think about tackling that piece and the supply chain, like I really want to improve this area, I want to save money. I think the default is to say, how do we just get them to do things faster or do things for less because we tell them to, or because we have a great business and they don't want to lose us. It's a huge learning for us. We to sort of think beyond that. So I went to our 3PL partner. I was like, what do your employees look for to be happy at your workplace? What are these, I guess, what do you give back to your employees? Because it's certainly not the 1 to 2 cents that comes off of every order that they fulfill. And then we actually uncovered that this like $350 or whatever admin fee we were paying every other week went to, pay for employee lunches, time off, salaries, like things like that. And it was just this huge awakening for me where I was like, wow, we have a lot to work with here. So, I was like, we can double this admin fee for you if you can come back to us and knock 2 cents off of our order. And she was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's going to make all my employees so, so happy. It was just such a simple trade-off. And I think without just having that conversation of understanding why their business exists, it was just really helpful. And then, when we increased volume more and more, we were able to increase their admin fee more and more. And it just like made everybody so much happier.
I love that story. Rodney, part of your platform also sort of facilitates communication. Which is not empathy, but communication is certainly part of the equation.
Yeah, I was just thinking, hearing Emily and Nikita, what they're saying is being empathetic and being able to communicate is a strategic advantage. And I think people do not play enough into that advantage. And a lot of times as an operator, you'll look at the output, which would be that physical good. And that's all you care about. And you do that, you're actually hurting the business. And like numerous examples could be talked about if you're like communicating properly with the entire team, they know exactly what your mission is. They know why you're doing it. They know why you're here. But if you do that in reverse, when you have a crunch like COVID, you can go and they'll help you and support you. They'll work extra shifts. They'll work maybe weekends. So when demand is like really, something critical for your business, that's when you can pull that chip. And that's about communicating. And what I've always done when I was an operator, communication is like one thing to pick up a phone, but it's more important to go and see people and meet them. And I put such an emphasis on that for me and my team. It's just a critical way to really build a bridge outside of something like as simple as I need this product at this cost at this day. So empathy, I think, is critical, and it's just something that people ignore often.
Yeah. So Emily, we have a lot of brands in our community that have launched during this period or in the process of launching. Can you share some insights on what it takes and what people should be thinking about building a supply chain in this environment? Because I know you're sort of in the thick of it right now.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like you'll notice a theme, but the biggest thing is to not be too hard on yourself on delays or things getting stuck, or if you have a bad supplier or high cost or whatever. I think like I see a lot of small companies or companies that are starting out really, really stress on this point. Just don't forget that this starting moment is the most expensive and the smallest your business will ever be. And yeah, so take the time to build the foundation, and don't be, bound by arbitrary deadlines that are set by you or by PR or whoever, or your investors or whatever, because I think this is the only opportunity you have to like build something great. I would say like a super, super common supply frustration, especially in the beginning, is just simply delayed product, missed timelines. And there's this trickle down effect. If something happens here in the supply chain, then everything gets messed up. It's kind of like if you're going through like a breakup or you're doing dry January, like I'm doing right now, keeping busy really, really helps. If you look at, keeping busy really helps. There's infinite things to do when you're small that you can't do when you're big. They're too cumbersome or difficult to do when you're bigger. Because in the long run, 1 week or 1 month is not going to matter. But the emotional tax you put on your team and your business, getting stressed out about these types of things right now is just, I think, can be very negative. So when I started at Behave, we stocked out. We're actually stocked out right now. We did it intentionally, but it, at the same time, it's really stressful, and it can be really frustrating. We stocked out because we wanted to make reformulations and improvements, and we are currently sort of dealing with a long and a very long and poorly managed supply chain. But instead of focusing all that energy on these negative things, we're kind of like, what can we do in the meantime that we can't do when we're back in stock? So, we're taking this time to revamp all of our email flows. We're doing a site optimization, like overhaul. These things are really hard to do. when you have stock. But I think, like, of course, these are all ways that you can hedge to build like a stronger business. But I think most importantly, from an emotional standpoint, keeping busy makes everybody happy. And it's like just keeping that momentum going, and it de-risks when you actually de-risks your business when you actually have sales to be had. I would say the other place to look is if you're cash flow constrained, don't wait to cut your costs. So do it now in big swaths. Like I see a lot of small companies spending $15,000, $20,000 on creative, PR, or a whole host of retainer fees. Cut those costs today. Talk to your freelancers and tell them and say, hey, look, this is the honest picture of where our business is. These are our goals. We love you we love you and respect your partnership, and we will be transparent with you about where our businesses is. And I think more often than not, you'll find that these people will cut you some slack, and actually it's a way to sort of like build a more honest and open relationship. So I would just, don't be too hard on yourselves.
So Emily and Nikita, you both mentioned that building an elastic supply chain has really been the backbone that supported the ability to scale Native and Harry's. And I guess, you, Rodney, are also a Harry's alum. So you also chimed in on the elastic supply chain sort of competitive advantage. Both of these brands launched as D2C. And then expanded into sort of traditional brick and mortar, which sort of, it's D2C is much more on demand, and you have a lot more flexibility, and that shifts dramatically when you have kind of the brick and mortar equation. Can you explain what you mean by building an elastic supply chain? Anyone, maybe Nikita, do you want to take that?
Sure. I think for me, you're talking about being prepared to scale. Elastic supply chain for me really means building a flexible and resilient supply chain. And to simplify it, I would sort of say I would look at really investing in three key pillars: systems, processes, and people. Like from a systems perspective, there's so much to unpack there, but it's important to have like good S&OP processes and planning systems to start. Those really need to be most agile, because S&OP is really tasked with balancing that short-term and long-term supply and demand. And that's so critical when you're going through mass scaling, which is what we saw at Harry's. But then, if you look at the other pillars of like processes and people, those sort of go a little bit hand in hand. But I think it's really important to think about, building redundancies as you think about building your teams. It's important to think about what processes are you adding. Is there clear communication? We talked about that just a little bit ago, but is there clear communication from end-to-end supply chain? Is everyone working towards shared KPIs and goals? And those are just some of the very many things that you need, in my mind, to build a resilient supply chain.
Emily, do you have anything to add?
No, that was great. No, I think an elastic supply chain means to me one that you can constrict and relax at will. The way to go about doing that, I think, is actually quite simple. You break down your supply chain into every component and make every single piece work for you and your supplier. If there's time for just a quick example, like with deodorant, e-com, it's quite simple. But if we bucket them into, you really have your raw materials, your manufacturing, your plastics, your trucking, and your shipping and fulfillment. Literally just go down the line, take one by one, think about what you can do for your suppliers to equip them with the flexibility that you need. So, if it's production lead times, show your manufacturers forecasts every other week, so they feel they can hold raw materials for you with less risk. Give broader ranges for production dates, like if that helps, and make up that time yourself downstream in the supply chain with trucking or whatever. If it's shipper boxes for your 3PL, like choose a place that's close to your warehouse so you can save 3 days on freight or whatever. Go down the list and also see like who's best fit to own these relationships. Is it you, or is it the supplier? Is it your manufacturer or your 3PL? Maybe it's better if your 3PL is ordering packaging for you, because they can piggyback better rates for you with other clients' volumes. And I think it's just getting super granular about them, because those 1 day, 2 days saved along like each step really, really adds up. And then I think if you step back and see, you'll actually realize there's a lot you can control because you sort of understand each little part.
Rodney, what have you done in your experience, or what are you seeing people do right now?
Yeah, I'm going to build on what Emily and Nikita just said, and I'll bring it into today. But if you're not really tight on the tactical level of your supply chain, you're going to fail. You need to know working hours, shifts, tooling capacity, machine capacity, overall factory utilization, lead times for every single thing. And when you know that, you know what levers to pull to help yourself and help your business. So a lot of people fail to do that, and they fail to look deep into their supply chain, and just you cannot be elastic without knowing some of those drivers. What we see people doing today, going into that, we see a few things. We see technology is really being, I think, a force multiplier for businesses, and it best in breed technologies. So a lot of times in the past, it was just like, I need an ERP, or I need this inventory management suite. That's not really the truth today. You see things like AI, machine learning, and planning technologies, and inventory management technologies. And that's helping brands see around the corner and flex with tools that can obviously crunch data faster than humans can, and help you kind of see around the corner and help, whether it's in a direct-to-consumer world, brick and mortar, or both. So that's what we see brands doing. And I think the brands that have done that have been extremely successful.
You know, very often innovation and marketing get all the credit for sales growth. But I think it was Emily, you said that at Native, that the supply chain that was built really provided a competitive edge and the ability to scale. Can you talk about that a little bit? And I know, Nikita, you mentioned it was the same at Harry's as well. Supply chain is not like the sexiest topic. It doesn't get like the big headlines or anything. But without a solid supply chain, you don't really have product, do you?
Kelly, we'd all disagree. Supply chain is sexy. Talking the wrong panel.
No, I'll keep it really brief. A good supply chain creates space in your cash flow to grow your company without stress. Like a good supply chain enables marketing to do what they want. You know, you need money and a great product to grow your company. And grooming your bottom line will get you more cash, and a good supply chain will allow you to respond to customers' feedback as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Do you have anything additional, Nikita?
Yeah, I guess to build off of that, I would say, you know, at Harry's, expansion and product innovation for us has been so rapid that we've really had to learn how to move and build our supply chain quickly. And so for us, like, agility was just everything. And I won't say that that doesn't come at a cost, because sometimes it can. You may move too fast and might not be as thorough as you would want. But I think it's all about like taking calculated risks and finding that balance and knowing when to sort of, as we're talking about scaling, like when to add processes versus keeping it simple. And that's been a huge competitive advantage for Harry's as we look at comparing ourselves to larger companies, where sometimes they get chained to their big systems, or making changes or adapting takes too long. And so that's something that we know has been an advantage for us, and just knowing how to build supply chains quickly with process, and finding that balance is really important.
You know, and Rodney, maybe you can, because you work with lots of brands, but also having a supply chain is really crucial, not only when you're scaling, but when you're looking to raise capital, because that's when people start looking under the hood. And, you know, it can be a repetitive advantage once you even take the capital, because then you really have to go into growth mode.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you look at, and I share this all the time, is cost, quality, and production within your supply chain. That's truly the three pillars. And to have a tight control on that. I was just speaking to actually Michael Corbo. He's the COO of Colgate-Palmolive. And when he's looking at acquisitions, it could be like Hello or these other companies, he's making sure that those three pillars are extremely sound. And if they're not, it kind of deters him from moving forward with some deals, because what you have is everything's held together by like these broken sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows once he acquires them, it's hard to fix that. Really, it's those three pillars that are critical that anyone will look at: investors, acquisition targets like big, CPG.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. As it relates to supply chain, I think, the past 10 months, I think every brand, no matter how solid your supply chain is, has really been in triage mode because everything is so unexpected. But the fragility and interconnectedness of the supply chain became a constant talking point in the press, among brand owners. And, the topics always went to building resiliency and redundancies. At the end of the day, building and managing a global supply chain is full of complexities. And moving from kind of a triage mindset to more strategic planning, whereas I think where a lot of people hopefully are right now, some of the things that we had talked about were in building out these strategies, bottoms up costing analysis, prescriptive analytics, scenario planning technology. Maybe we can start with Emily, and you can kind of pick one of these that we talked about and kind of explain how and why it's important in starting to build, sort of going from triage to really building kind of a modern supply chain strategy.
Oh my goodness, what a question.
So
I didn't think you were going to call on me. Okay, let me think. So,
well, no one got back to me about the order, so it's you know what? I'm spinning the wheel.
Okay, yeah, no, I totally. I can't really speak too much to technology because I mean, I think Anvil's an amazing platform. It's pretty much the only one that I will use. But I think, yeah, I would say like bottoms up costing is just going to be the most important thing at a small stage. I mean, even when we were at Native, it was the thing we obsessed about more than anything in the entire world, more so than analytics or scenario planning, because I felt like, scenario planning is really tough when you're small. You don't always have the resources to consider too many what ifs because everything is just going wrong all at the same time. And so it kind of speaks to what I was saying before. If you have interest, there are infinite ways to break down your supply chain so you understand how all of it works. And I think it's just super, super crucial to do that, to build a strong supply chain foundation. I mentioned it a few times earlier, but understanding the business drivers for your suppliers, understanding like how their business works and how they make money, will help you negotiate with them, work with them, and then actually just get better pricing and a better product and a better relationship from them. Not sure if that answered the question, but that was what was on my mind.
Nikita, how about you? Prescriptive analytics, scenario planning. We'll give technology to Rodney since that's his world, but
yeah, I mean, I can't say we've implemented a lot of these things yet, but as I think about getting out of triage mode and into the future, I would love to focus on running, 360 risk audits as an example. It's something that we just, like I said, have not had the luxury to do given our size and focus on expansion. But as I grow the team and want to invest in the future, want to go deeper in the supply chain. So gather as much information as possible, go beyond just contract manufacturers to sub-tier suppliers, and then, use prescriptive analytics at some point to make better decisions when planning for alternative scenarios. With COVID, just why that's so important. And this sort of touches on technology, just using technology at a deeper level, as Rodney mentioned. At my previous company, they even used to use the software that acted like a watchdog for commodity and raw material prices. There's so much out there. I think with our size, we haven't been able to obviously get to that level yet, but that would certainly be my focus as I look to invest in the future supply chain of Harry's.
So, Rodney, what are your thoughts on sort of, where people should be thinking in sort of going from triage to strategic thinking?
Yeah, I'm going to build on Emily's comments, and then I'll bring that into technology. So if you're operating in a manual world, and Catherine, you asked about single source suppliers, I'm going to talk about this. knowing bottoms up cost, and this is going to be kind of tactical, but knowing every single step of your supply chain, each of the production steps, the amount of labor that's going in there, cycle times, machine rate, yields, SG&A, profit, overhead, et cetera, et cetera. You can use that to go into a should cost and also just a should supply chain. So you can take that information and look for other suppliers. So it's like you can move away from your single source, maybe bring in a second source, et cetera. So that's a manual way to really build resiliency and really a focus in your supply chain. What you're seeing with technology, though, it's huge. Two that I mentioned would be a Kinaxis and Logility. They build AI and scenario planning in your actual planning. So you can go through and do a million different scenarios, and you can see what's the best for you, and then you can tie them and actually set your entire business against those scenarios. And then you can quickly course correct. And that's the power of technology, where if you're working on Excel and Google Sheets, which a lot of brands do, you can't do that. There's not flexibility there, and there's not the intelligent power behind it. So a lot of big companies will use these tools, but there's other tools for smaller companies, medium-sized companies that do something very similar that you can get into.
So you've built and managed global supply chains, and I think you said there was something like $1 billion of purchasing that's flowed through Anvil in the past year. What are the trends that you're seeing that brands need to be thinking about?
I would say there's a few. The first thing is really looking at your supply chain and seeing if you have the right suppliers. What we do at Anvil with analytics, we do really bottoms up costs on the back end, where we can see things around cost, lead times, your production capabilities, supplier scorecards, so you can see if you truly have a good supplier. The second is redundancy. And you need to put redundancy within your supply chain. Whether or not you act upon that is one thing, but you need to know where you have gaps and weaknesses, and you need to really probably shore those up. No operator on the planet foresaw what happened with COVID, zero. And no one in operations had ever been in this type of environment, ever. So having that redundancy, having that plan in place is critical. The last thing is, I think what people have been doing around supply chain is looking at their partners holistically and seeing if that's the right partner for you to continue to scale. This could be freight forwarders, this could be distribution centers, it doesn't matter. They're taking a real look at who they're working with and why. When things get bad, you see how people truly act. Those are the three biggies that we see. That I'm sure will resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah. So are you guys okay if we start taking some questions from the audience? I've seen some pop into the Q&A. So the first one is, what advice would you give for finding manufacturing partners for an early startup business? And the second part to that question is the criteria you would look for in those partnerships. Rodney, maybe we can talk a little bit about the marketplace that's part of Anvil as a potential solution, but also then maybe Nikita and Emily, you can also chime in.
Yeah, just what we did the work for you. So what we looked at is we went door to door essentially and looked at suppliers around social responsibility, operations, quality, finance, and digitize that aspect so you could have a really good supplier, and you can find it in a second. Done. It's like, think of Airbnb for finding a supplier. And we did that because I know how painful it is, and I was using Google to search for suppliers. I was going to trade shows, which obviously you can't do that now, and or my friends. But even my friends, what I found out is they were using bad suppliers. So it was a painful world, but we tried to do the heavy lifting for at least our brands that we work with.
So I'll ask Emily and then maybe Nikita. I guess how do you go when you're looking for a new supplier? But I think the second part of the question, the criteria, what criteria do you look for in suppliers to make sure that there's the right fit?
No, that's a great question. I've worked with Rodney many times in the past, and he's actually matched me with a bunch of amazing suppliers. So I think he's really helped me figure out what the right criteria is. Yeah. So, and it's certainly something I'm quite familiar with. I think when you're small, sometimes you feel like your hands are tied because it's hard to find somebody who will work with your MOQs, or, I mean, that's basically it. It's really hard to find that, especially when you're small. So I think, yeah, that's definitely like the first question. I would say phone calls, and just figuring out, writing down on a piece of paper what matters to you. If it's quality, it's quality, and if it's MOQs, it's that. If you have cash and you can invest a little bit more, that's fine too. I think more important than all of that is, do you have a partner who believes in your business and cares about your business, and who's excited by what you're making? Anybody, if you're talking deodorants or shampoos or any of the other SKUs that I've launched in the past, there are infinite suppliers who can make this stuff for you and who can make it well, actually. But are you going to get the resources of R&D, the enthusiasm from them? Yeah, that's going to be the most important thing, I think, for you to figure out.
Nikita, what are some of the questions you ask?
Yeah, I was actually just going to double click into what Emily said, just because that resonates so much with me, given our size. To her point, you can find infinite amount of suppliers with maybe the same capabilities, but it's about finding the right type of supplier and right size supplier for you. So we, obviously have built out a scorecard and, sort of use that as something that we evaluate suppliers on. A lot of similar categories as Rodney and Emily mentioned, like cost, quality, technology, their customer support, overall capabilities. We look at who their customers are. But I think the thing that is often overlooked is what Emily had mentioned around finding the right size supplier for you. How important are you going to be for them? Are you going to be deprioritized when push comes to shove, or are you going to be, in a place where you can grow to be a big player? So, those are some of the core, criteria for our assessment.
So we have a question here from Eden, who is interested in hearing some experiences of managing inventory for subscription D2C companies. So I guess, Nikita, that's you. Was native subscription as well, Emily, or?
Yeah, native, about 25% of the business.
Okay. So Nikita, let's start with you, and then Emily. I don't know if the subscription sort of adds a kind of an additional thought process in supply chain or not, but.
Sorry, just could you repeat that question again? I wasn't clear.
Yeah, so the question was, can you give some advice on how to build a supply chain for a subscription-based D2C business?
Got it. Yeah, I think a really important aspect of that is we talked about suppliers and partners, but particularly your DCs. I think just, talking a little bit more about that, because it is sort of a changing environment. I think because of legacy experience, you have far more players that are more wholesale driven or have that wholesale experience versus DTC. So finding like the right DC that works for DTC and wholesale can be difficult. And a lot of times you might need a different strategy for DTC and wholesale. Like that's what Harry's had to do. We use one DC for DTC and another for wholesale. I think there are lots of examples now of companies that are transitioning to be more DTC specific, to be omni-channel, but this is again a newer trend. One thing I've found to be really important is just understanding the type of technology they have is very critical to their ability to be successful in managing an omni-channel business. So a lot of companies I've seen have like WMS that is homegrown and just can't handle, say, like unit level economics or accounting, which makes it very difficult to handle DTC business. You have to look at, are they flexible? Can they handle multiple SKUs? Can they handle countless product combinations? That are all challenges that come with having a DTC business. So I think like those are the types of questions that I would ask as I'm thinking about who the right DC partner is for me.
It's interesting because there's another question here also, and it is about 3PLs. And the question is, what should your expectations be of a 3PL for a strong omni-channel D2C kind of customer service experience?
Yeah, I would say a lot of what I just mentioned, you know,
Yeah.
making sure that they have the right technology, making sure that they have the flexibility with labor. Questions like, you know, how have they designed their production space? Can it be agile? Can they separate out inventory and handle customization? Again, these are like very specific DTC challenges that you just don't see with retail. And that's why it's like you're looking for a bit of a unicorn that can handle both. And I'm sure as time continues, like that will continue to be a bit of a norm. But in present time, like that was a challenge for us too, to find like one partner that can handle our omni-channel business.
Yeah, I totally agree with Nikita. It's actually what we did at Native too. We had a DTC warehouse and then a retail completely separate. The capabilities that we needed were just too drastically different. I get asked that question a lot. Like people are looking to switch 3PLs, switch warehouse providers, and everybody's usually just looking for a race to the bottom with who's cheapest. Again, it depends what matters to you, because it's in some ways people think of, you know, order fulfillment now as like this commoditized thing, but it's yeah, one client can have a great experience at the same place as, like, you know, as somebody who's had a very bad experience. And so yeah, just write down what matters to you. If you need to be near a port, your stuff's coming in from China, maybe you should go with somebody on the West Coast. And I think it just really comes down to the relationship management. You know, everybody is trying to pick and pack things as quickly as possible with as few errors and give you the cheapest shipping rates as you can and the cheapest storage and whatever. Yeah, you have to write down all of these things and vibe it out and see who like makes you feel the happiest to talk to every day. Yeah, I don't know.
Rodney, this one's for you. Will China continue to dominate the global supply chain?
Great question. I'll say some statistics. So when Chinese New Year hit last year, really China shut down. It took them less than a month to come back up and running and to start producing product. In the US, it was over a month. It was 45 to 50 days, what we've seen. And depending on your industry, you'll still be impacted. China has a strategic advantage around really capabilities. So they have some of the best engineers on the planet, tooling, you know, electrical, et cetera, et cetera. They have speed to, you know, as an advantage, and they have costs as an advantage. So if you can overcome those three things anywhere globally, you can take away, you know, China's capabilities or the like pull China has for manufacturing. What we are seeing though, we're seeing other locations opening up for non-tech. So Southeast Asia. So if you're in cut and sew and other industries, that's really opening up. Those capabilities around like, you know, the expertise and tooling and all that go away. We also see things in the US around injection molding, sustainable packaging coming online. And I think the reason for that is they're getting smart around automation and just being very, very competitive. But really it's industry specific. I would say tech is not going to move away from China anytime soon. I think health, beauty, and wellness has a huge opportunity to cut and sew, very easy, but it's industry specific. And I personally don't see it happening very soon.
Yeah. You know, 3PL is a real sticky wicket because there's another question about 3PL. And any insights on how to minimize the risks of sort of, well, it's not only 3PL, but sort of minimize the risks when you're changing vendors, be it a 3PL, a vendor, a manufacturer. They're really big decisions and sometimes complicated and large projects.
I think, like, from personal experience, this is actually something that we're going through right now. We're pivoting to, you know, as part of what Rodney mentioned with sort of reassessing where your supply chain looks like, and just looking at bringing fulfillment closer to home. We're actually going through a bit of a shift right now. And I think any sort of change between suppliers or DCs, what have you, it's really important to have a good phase in, phase out plan, and just backup plans in case something does happen, especially if it's a new untested supplier. So for us, having a good inventory strategy, making sure that we have the right safety stock necessary during that time period if something was to happen is just very critical. And just having, like I said, a backup plan in case you do face issues. Beyond that, I think like the more tactical answer too is like ensuring that you have all your like details sorted. And what I mean by that is like if you need EDI connections, this needs to be approved through SAP. Your systems need to connect and talk to each other. Like you want to make sure all of that is done well in advance of any large transition. And that's where you can get caught if you move too quickly and don't have those plans in place.
So Emily, I have a question from you from Kristen. She is asking how you originally set up and how you manage your new company supply chain. She's interested in how a startup that may have financial constraints does that. And I'm assuming that's maybe sort of like what systems are you using? What technology do you leverage? I'm assuming that's probably what she's interested in.
Yeah, and Kristen, you can totally reach out to me on this because we can chat about this forever. But yeah, that's a good question. It's piece by piece, and just trying not to get too overwhelmed by everything. I think when you're small, you want to keep things simple. I had that initial when I first started Wellness, this personal care company. I had that initial urge to sort of own every single piece of the supply chain, including sourcing all the flavors, that was a mistake. You don't have the bandwidth or the financial ability to do that upfront. So yeah, just putting a little bit of trust in your suppliers and staying on top of them relentlessly, I think is really, really key. Getting other people's feedback. Nikita mentioned this, literally just vetting through references, talking to other people who have used trusted suppliers, I think is also really important. It's hard to go in blind with somebody who you don't know anybody who's worked with them or anything like that. I think that's probably a mistake in the beginning. But yeah, in terms of systems, yeah, everything I did was based off of Google Sheets and I used Anvil. That's basically it. Yeah. I mean, your list of suppliers in the beginning, it depends on, of course, how many SKUs you're launching. It is not going to exceed 10. And I think that's fine to manage in the short term and to kind of keep that really close personal beat on all those relationships. It's still possible at this stage. No, go ahead.
This is a very tactical question from Robin. For a D2C business, do you recommend using a 3PL or order management system or a cloud-based system that you can control?
I guess I can talk about that. Yeah. I would recommend cloud-based systems for everything, just in general. So to answer that, for 3PL, I think it depends on the stage and who you are. Mm-hmm. If you're super early stage, you could just use their internal systems and get reports via Excel. Good enough. And then as you start growing, you would start connecting your inventory systems, your ERPs with EDI, APIs, and get a connected supply chain, as Nikita was just saying. But it really does depend on your stage. I don't know if that's a direct answer. Happy to elaborate more in that.
Another question that came in, this was at registration, was how do you get ahead of long lead times for packaging without having to make a huge upfront investment?
I can chime in here. I mean, I'm assuming that we're talking about tooling as an example of like a form of investment. In which case, like my recommendation when it comes to packaging would be to collaborate with your R&D early in the ideation phase for a new product and consider using off-the-shelf options versus customizing everything. I think it's very tempting with the focus on packaging in the last decade to want to over-customize everything. But especially early on, it might not be worth the investment. And I'll say, like, being close in packaging and now working on sustainability a ton, this trend is also shifting. I think the focus in fact packaging now is like, do we absolutely need this plastic piece, or like, less is more now. And so I would really take a look at, sort of your ideation and see what is necessary versus not.
So we have time for one more question, and I'm actually going to be selfish and ask it because I'm curious. But, we haven't really touched on sustainability at all, and sustainability has a huge impact on supply chain. I think not only from a materials perspective, but with sustainability also comes sort of transparency. How are you guys tackling sustainability and sort of the need for transparency all the way down to kind of the supplier?
Yeah, I can maybe get started, but I think sustainability for me has been a more recent big priority. We have, always at Harry's sort of taken an ad hoc approach with it. Whenever it made sense, we sort of tried to limit our plastic or introduce PCR materials in our items, but hadn't really taken like a corporate approach. And currently I'm sort of heading up that program for us. And part of it now, beyond just talking to initial companies to get an understanding on how to structure this project, is taking a step back and actually working with a company to audit our full end-to-end supply chain. And that's actually something we're starting in the next month. So I would probably have more insight to share after we complete that, but it's doing exactly what you just mentioned, collecting all of the data, output on like carbon emissions, water usage, raw materials, and looking at like owned factories and sub-tier suppliers to really get down to what is our current emissions look like, and then where are there opportunities to actually go and improve and make positive impact.
So Emily, you're sort of in startup mode. Are you addressing sustainability sort of at this point? Or
Yeah, it's hard because I think it's so much to do to like how you define your brand, and of course like some brands are built around it. I personally think it's really important. But you can't always do that across every type of product. And so it's, it's just something that's always in the back of my mind for sure. And so, I think the things we really focus on are, it's just what's important to your brand. For us, it's really important that we work with as many women suppliers as possible. Like we think about those types of things. And then we always ask, hey, what's the most eco option? When you're small, you just might not be able to afford it at this time, but maybe you, to your point, like what Nikita said is like super on point. There are ways to make your shipping carbon neutral or whatever, just sort of seeing where you can take those little opportunities. Look, not every brand and certainly not every beauty brand is focused on sustainability, at least not in the short term, but I do think the industry is shifting there. The number of options for post-consumer recycled plastics, for bioplastics, non-plastics. I think whoever can be on the forefront to solve those issues will win big time, but it's expensive right now for sure.
It's also really complicated because all of the conversations the conversation usually ends with, well, it depends. Because everyone has something different that they're focusing on. Every packaging decision has a consequence of some sort. But I'm sorry, Nikita, I sort of cut you off.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, based on some conversations I've had with, especially beauty brands, it's interesting to see now that because we're trying to eliminate pieces of packaging or materials, that also then positively impacts your cost. Like, for example, you see brands now introducing the refill model where they have refill stations at retailers. And so there's ways, I think, where people are just getting more creative and trying to take costs out as well. But to Emily's point, it's still something that is new. And I think particularly like raw materials that are more sustainable are certainly more expensive at this time. But, hopefully as people invest more in this space, it will change.
So Rodney, because everything, because you have sort of this platform working with so many people, what are the requests that you're getting around sustainability and supply chain?
We've gone deep into ocean plastics. We have a lot of partners that are doing that. The other one, Emily kind of mentioned, is like PCR and post. It's recycled resins. And then lastly, it's looking at things that you would normally do in plastic, you can now do in paper base. So those are like the three biggies that we're focused on. With sustainability, just to touch upon that, it's just about looking at your entire supply chain. When I was at Apple, I looked at conflict minerals. So making sure that they're coming from sustainable, like good sources. And it's just about asking questions and really caring.
So we have come to time. And I want to thank all of you for first of all, for taking the time to have this conversation today, and also for the generosity of the information. For everyone, there is a white paper download available from Anvil. They're also offering a 10% discount. You can click through here, or we can put you in touch with Anvil. Rodney, thank you so much for helping us to pull this together. And, you know, the platform you've built is so brilliant. So I can't, listen, it is worth a half an hour to take a walkthrough of their platform. You won't be sorry. You know, we have some other webinars coming up for February. Next week, we're doing the British Beauty Market Update. We did one in March. We're doing it with Sterling Murray of the Red Tree and Millie Kendall of the British Beauty Council. On February 11th, we're going to do a trend briefing with Wonder Thompson Intelligence. They're going to do a beauty and wellness edit for us of their 2021 100 top trends. It's one of my favorite trend reports. So I'm really excited to share that with everyone. And then later this month, we're going to be hosting a Brexit workshop because it is finally here. It's real. It's happening. So if you have any questions, we're going to do a workshop on that. So Emily, Nikita, Rodney, thank you so much for spending an hour with us this afternoon. Rodney, thank you for your collaboration. This is also going to be available on demand. So we'll send a link with the Anvil white paper and ways to get in touch with them to do a demo. And have a great weekend, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.